Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. We're continuing on our 10th pick and beyond draft series, getting to know some possible prospects that the Bears may select at 10, some maybe a little bit later in the draft. We will see. And so today we are joined by Tony Catalina. He's Texas A&M beat reporter for the Statesman. Tony, I really appreciate you hopping on with me, and I'm actually very excited about this one because there's been a whole lot of chatter about Shemar Stewart at 10.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course. So let's start. I do want to get to Shamar because that's the big one. That's the one I think also has a lot of question marks for a lot of fans also. But I want to start personally with Nic Scourton on this one because I feel like there's a lot of draft big boards that have Scorton ranked higher than Shemar Stewart, yet some reason Shamar Stewart's the one mocked at 10 to the Bears over Scorton. So I want to start. He started his career at Purdue, obviously transferred over to A&M on his junior season, where you kind of him maybe not statistically have the same numbers as what he did at Purdue that previous year, but he still was making a lot of noise on the field. Sometimes that box score doesn't tell everything, but share a little bit about that time coming over from Purdue and what you saw in that move for him.
Yeah, so for him, it was almost a homecoming. He's from Bryan, which is the town over from College Station. He's a local kid. Admitted that he, going to Texas A&M was something that was always, something he wished he could do and he made happen. On the football field, he was a guy who was he was high effort, right? Like you said, sometimes the stat sheet isn't filled up, but it didn't really. If you pop on the film, you can see this is a guy who works hard in the backfield. He plays really tough in the run game. A lot, and we'll talk about it with Shemar Stewart, but sometimes it didn't cash in, when it came to sacks and it came to tackles. But he was always a constant presence on that offensive line. He's somebody that they had to scheme for and prepare for. He's a tough guy. He admitted he had to make some lifestyle changes where he played a little bigger than he wanted to last year. At his pro day, he looked great. He said he dropped about 25, 30 pounds, and it shows in his physique. But productive guy who understands how to be a professional. And I think his best years are honestly ahead of him.
Let's talk a little bit about that A&M defense because that was, from week one against Notre Dame, it was kind of that moment where I think a lot of people thought that game was going to end like 10-7 at one point because of the way it was going defensively on each side for Notre Dame's defense and A&M's defense. But what made that A&M defense work so well? Because I do think it was a combination of a lot of different things, and you have two edge rushers now who are both looking to be drafted pretty high in this draft. But what was kind of that scheme and how things functioned defensively?
Yeah, there was it really predicated around Shemar Stewart and Nic Scourton and just the ability to affect the line of scrimmage. And obviously, as the season broke down and injuries became a thing, they became a little less effective. But in that Notre Dame game, they look all world, right? Like that's a team that is full of talent. I mean, Shemar Stewart was a 5-star guy, somebody who stayed and it was a Texas A&M recruit who kind of went through that infamous class. But they were kind of the meat and the potatoes of that team were the front seven, the linebackers, the defensive line. They had some tough interior. Shamar Turner is another guy who was in the draft this year. He was an interior defensive lineman. So if you looked at the Texas A&M defense, you obviously had to start with the 4 guys up front.
When you talk about Nic Scourton, a lot of the things they say are that the way he carries his size, being so athletic, and you talk about him feeling like he needed to drop some size this last year, but it seems like a lot of people were still impressed with the athleticism through even what he was carrying. You said, that extra 20 pounds this last season. Where do you think he fits best? Is he like a true edge guy at the next level, do you believe?
Yeah, I think he's a guy who can be on the edge, a 4-3 defensive end. It's going to be on brand for being in Texas here, but he reminds me of DeMarcus Lawrence a lot, where he can get to the passer. He's probably not going to have crazy sack numbers, but there's going to be a wow or two play every game where he stops a running back in the backfield, and you're like, oh, this guy doesn't quit on a single play. So I think you find him in the right spot. He seems to have the right mentality, like I said, losing the weight and kind of understanding what being a professional is. He's going to be, like I said, he's going to be somebody who can really help a team this, whether it be late first round, early second round, wherever he ends up, I think he's going to be a steal for somebody.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, like I said, and I said this on every podcast I've had so far as I'm going through some of these prospects, but this number 10 pick is a little weird because there's not this a ton of super high end talent in this draft. There's a few guys that people say are, like 1, 2, 3 here, like Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham are probably the three that people are saying are the three. Yes, these are can't misses. And the rest you may have to reach, especially at 10. So a guy like a Nic Scourton, if it is a big need, which for the Bears, we will see. They made some moves this offseason. They added Dio Jingbo, obviously Montez Sweat on the other side. And so they have pieces there, but is it the future? I don't know. And so that's where this question comes in. If they think a guy like Nic Scourton or Shemar Stewart could be developed into that future edge rusher for them, it may be worth it. It may seem like a crazy pick this year. And then in a couple years, they're like, oh, okay, they were genius. But you never know. And that's the part of the draft. It's not a science. I do want to talk, because one of the things when you go back and you watch his film, and when you read anything about him, they always talk about his spin move and how dangerous his spin move is when it comes to being able to get to the quarterback. And there was a lot of pressures, maybe not the sacks there all the time, but I do think maybe some of that is just in holes, some of the other things that were going on up front. But when you talk about that, those moves he can make to get to the quarterback and transferring those to the NFL at the next level, the one concern people say they may have are some of those counter moves when coming up to some of these NFL offensive linemen. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's valid, right? I mean, because the skill set it takes to be a difference maker in college football, even if it's the SEC, is lesser than the NFL, right? Everybody there is quality. Everybody there has a plan. But what can you do? What's your second move? What's your third move? How do you set things up moving forward? I think these guys are super high IQ football players. I think they understand how to set offensive linemen up, and it's going to be about, honing that craft. They're going to get in with a great defensive line coach, wherever it may be, a defensive, a D coordinator that kind of uses them in the right spots, tells them what is a good counter move. But I think they have, when you look at it, you're trying to draft traits, right? You're trying to draft somebody who looks like he can play the part, who has some production. And I think both of these guys honestly have the ability to do that.
Yeah, that trait word, that's the Shemar Stewart word. And so let's get over to him, because I think this is the big one. I have read, when you go and you watch Shemar Stewart and you read anything about him, everything says that when it comes to the traits, when it comes to the physical side, when it comes to the athleticism, this guy checks all of the boxes. The problem is some people are concerned about maybe the football IQ, some of the mechanics, maybe not knowing where he is on the field at certain times. I read one former scout say that he is the prime example of like that athletic ability, but having no idea how to play football. And that terrifies me. So just tell me a little bit about that. Is there concern in that area of him maybe just not knowing the game well enough?
I think in his final pivotal year, I think it was a tough deal. With Mike Elko coming in year one, it's a brand new defense. He had done something differently the first 2 years. And then you come in here and as much as you get the spring and you get the fall and you're trying to learn, and it's as simple as go get the quarterback. It's not quite as simple, especially when Mike Elko actually spoke about it. And if you watch the tape, it checks out. Like at Pro Day, he was saying like, well, everyone can scheme for Shamar, right? They're chipping him with the tight end, they're chipping him with the running back, that they're shading his side, and they recognize the ability. So the production may not be there. Now, game to game, like you said, there may be some situations where he probably didn't do the right thing or he missed a sack by like that. Like, he's like the horseshoes and hand grenades guy, so almost doesn't count. But if you look at it, he might have had 10 sacks, but instead he doesn't even have close to that over his 3 years. So yeah, you're right. This is a guy who is going to either get a GM a raise or get a GM fired, because he's the type of guy like it's boom or bust for sure.
Yeah, and that's scary for the Pick 10. I think if they were at like 2021, I would maybe consider it a little bit more. It truly terrifies me. But like I said, in 2 years, if you hit on somebody like this, it is one of the things where you're like, okay, well, it looks like a genius at that point. And we kind of go back to, because I cover the Jags also, and what they did with Trayvon Walker. When they drafted Trayvon Walker, #1 overall, a lot of the similarities come into that, where it's like he was playing all over the place. So he never had really a true position in college. And so the numbers and stats and box score wasn't really there. There was a lot of rawness in it. And Trayvon Walker has been a really good player the last couple of years. He was drafted over Aiden Hutchinson, and that's going to be kind of held over his head forever. And so that's one of the things you kind of are evaluating also. But that's one of the things that does pop out in the positive light of Shemar Stewart, the versatility, because when you go back and what he's been able to do, and kind of he played all over the line. So you like to see guys who have the ability to move different places. And then you would hope that at the next level, a Dennis Allen, for example, the new Bears defensive coordinator, will be able to find the right spot for Shamar. But how long does that take? And where does he fit at the next level? And how quickly can he grasp certain concepts at the NFL level?
Yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it on the head. He's a guy who, he's a guy you're gonna have to lean on your scouting department, right? If somebody in that room has a conviction, they're gonna bang on the table for him at 10, and you feel really convicted by that. You better hope that you see it the right way, right? Because, like you said, there may be some teams that don't feel the same way, and then you're looking at them, and you might be at 13, 14, 15. You get down, slide down a little bit, and you're like, when do you start drafting for the draft profile? When do you start drafting for this athletic ability that is rare? I mean, if you look at the intangibles, he looks in a lot of senses like a guy like Myles Garrett. Now, the production was, I mean, night and day different when he was at Texas A&M, but you just, at some point, you're like, okay, this guy is going to make me look like a genius, or you're like I said, we're going to pack up my locker here. So
Yes, that's why I'm going to trust the guys. I'm not the scout. I'm not the general manager in the NFL for a reason, but I do. Yeah, it worries me a little bit. And when you talk about the one thing that you kind of have to separate sometimes, and I was big last year. So when you talk about those sack numbers, it's really hard to just specifically say this person had only X amount of sacks, because to your point, inches away from 10, 11, double digit sacks. And sometimes it happens that way. We saw it with Javon Dexter a few years ago in Florida. Florida's defense was so bad that Javon Dexter's numbers didn't look the way that maybe a lot of people thought he would play. And then you go back to last year, for example, I was a huge fan of Jared Verse, and everybody was Dallas Turner over Jared Verse. The reason I love Jared Verse is because the way he was able to set the edge too, and the way he could play against the run. So in that aspect, what have you seen from Shamar? Because we know that sack number maybe isn't what people want to see, but is he able to be that run defender also?
100%. Like he plays the run really well. I think him and Scorton, that was kind of their calling card. They really did pride themselves on high effort plays, and sometimes to Shemar Stewart's detriment, he'd blow right by a play because he'd read it so quickly, or he'd be on it so quickly he'd almost play himself out of position. And that's partly some of the athletic ability. But no, you put him in the right system, which I think both of these guys would really thrive in, a traditional 4-3, get him on the edge, let him rush the passer, 3-down guy. But when it comes down to first down and 10 and somebody's kind of run it off tackle, I think he's going to be able to place, and he's going to mount a tight end, he's going to be able to break off of a tackle. I think he's the type of guy who has the ability, and much like Scorton, is just scratching the surface of what he could really do. He's going to be one of those guys, in my opinion, where you're going to look 3-4 years from now and he's got like 22 sacks, and you're gonna be like, where was this? A&M's gonna feel scorned again, and but no, I think he's gonna be a quality player at the next level.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of things that you go back and you read that people say that the fit wise for both of these players does kind of fit Dennis Allen's defense with that 4-3 style. Dennis Allen likes to move the guys around the line a lot. He does like the kind of bigger guys, which I think is maybe why some people do like Scorton, because he is kind of, like I'm not saying he's obviously Cam Jordan, but more of that bigger lineman. But now he's lost some weight, so maybe he's not as close to that as you maybe would have connected Dennis Allen, thinking of what he's seeing on tape from this last year. And it's funny you say the Myles Garrett comment when it comes to him, because everybody they're like, his testing is Myles Garrett, but maybe his film isn't quite Myles Garrett. And that's when these scouts have to start evaluating where exactly they see the ceiling, I guess, is where you start looking at a player with Shemar Stewart. Because if you have all of the traits and all of the abilities, you just have to be able to start kind of getting that next level of the mechanics and the football side of it. Do you have a coach that can develop that out of him? And I do think Dennis Allen, with his experience in the NFL and some of these players that he has developed, is the right coach to do that. But at 10, do you go there? Do you take that risk?
Right. And you said it. Allen's a guy who can bring these players in, well-respected coach, a guy knows what he's talking about. Now, it's not really about him in my sense, because at 10, you need a guy who can make plays, right? Like, development is for later down in the draft, maybe day 2, day 3 guys. You want to know that the guy you're getting at 10 is somebody who can step off the bus and make plays for you. Now, maybe Dennis Allen feels that way. He's like, okay, both of these guys are somebody I can get the most out of. And if they're not, of course, Bears pundits and fans are going to kind of debate that all through the summer and into the preseason game.
Yeah, if that is the selection at 10, I know we'll see some really not nice tweets probably initially, but he could win Chicago over fast if he gets a couple sacks pretty quick, especially if he's sacking Jordan Love in Green Bay week 1 or something. He'll get Love really quick. Another name I wanted to talk to, a defensive side of the ball, Shamar Turner. He's somebody who I noticed a ton in that week when I'm a Notre Dame fan. Week 1 game against Notre Dame, I was seeing Shamar Turner all over the field that game, and he was someone that popped out pretty quickly to me. He also played everywhere on the line, so it's also you're kind of predicting where he kind of fits in the NFL, what a defensive coordinator sees him at. Where do you see him playing best at that next level?
So he's a bigger guy. You could see it in his waist. He's got a lot more mass. He's a lot more stronger at the point of attack than the other two. And those two guys were strong, but different style, different body. I see him as like a 3-tech, somebody who's more like kicked inside interior. I think he's going to end up being somebody who is like a steal for the draft. I think because he's somebody who has been injured. He's had to deal with an ankle or a shin, a leg injury that he had to put a rod in. He hasn't done pretty much anything. He did a little bit of pro day field work, but there really wasn't. He didn't do anything combine. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. So it's kind of a mystery thing, right? You're gonna have to lean on the film. And what did you see from him this year? And how do you feel about it? And do you feel comfortable taking him in the 3rd, maybe the 4th round? Like how high do you want to grab him? But I think he is definitely an intriguing prospect.
Yeah, first of all, shin injury sounds terrible. I know when I like hit my shin on my bike riding, like it hurts. I can't imagine having a rod put in. But yeah, when I was seeing some of his numbers, because he had 6 sacks, and it started making me think about his fit on this defense, because everybody I've talked to who talk about Dennis Allen, the importance of the pass rush and the interior defensive line is huge in how Dennis Allen runs his defenses. He's more of that secondary guy, but he bases a lot of his secondary schemes and kind of things he does by that interior pass rush. And so is that where you saw most of his sacks last year for Shemar?
Yeah, definitely.
So to me, that feels like we're like a kind of one of those fits. But where do you see him going in this draft? Because then that's the next question mark.
Yeah, I could see him. I mean, it's really fascinating, right? Because all it takes is one team, and one team he could have wowed him in the draft process. He could have, in a one-on-one conversation, because he wasn't able to do anything really physical until his pro day. And so you look at the film, you talk to the guy, the player. I know he plays with an edge. I know he plays with a nasty streak, and that position, that is something that's coveted in a lot of instances. Can you have that controlled aggression? Can you play with that edge? So for me, I mean, I could honestly see him be like a back end 3rd round guy. You know what I mean? I mean, and if you get him early day 3, I think you feel really good about it.
What do you think? As we talk about the SEC and being able to play football in the SEC and the higher level competition. I've done drafts on some guys recently who started in the ACC, moved over to the ACC, and they felt like they wanted to do that to up some of the competition level that they had. So do you think that some of these guys that play in the SEC, and we know we even this last year, Texas being the last SEC team remaining was maybe a shock to some people, but when you having that high of a level and then going into the NFL and going against a lot of SEC guys, do you think that really does kind of up some of these guys getting ready to be playing in the NFL?
Yeah, I think I mean, I know some people that have moved from the 1AA FCS level, gone to the SEC level, just to prove that they're able to step up in this competition. And I think there is something to be said. They always say that, the saying is it just means more down here in the South. And it's true. I mean, there is talent all over the place, and it does feel like a minor league system for the NFL. And I think that does prepare you well. I think you look at it in the draft numbers, more guys in the SEC get drafted year over year than any other conference. But once you get to the NFL, you realize everybody here is good. Everybody here is legit talent. So I think it does help you prepare, but the people I've talked to that have come back to campus and talk, it's another gear. It's a whole nother level, and you got to prepare yourself in a different style.
Yeah, one of the guys that I was talking about, Andrew Makuba, and he obviously started at Clemson, moved over to Texas, and that was one of the people that I was talking about that he specifically, I guess, said, I wanted to prove that I could do it at the SEC level because I wanted NFL scouts to see, oh, this guy can do it at the highest level in college football. So it always it makes me think all the time, and especially the way that this first college football playoff ended up working out. It was probably not what I thought a lot of people would have predicted in week 1 when things were starting, but I do think that that it gives more chances for guys to be seen, but it also turned into this SEC where the newest team in the SEC was the one that was going the deepest. And so it will be interesting to see how kind of it all works as the years go by, and it's probably going to expand again. So we'll have more teams soon also. But yeah, I always just think about that. And are there any other A&M guys that I know that you guys have a wide receiver that's kind of talked about a little bit? I think it's Muhammad or something like that. Any other to A&M guys that you see could, kind of be decent or good, or you have some confidence in at the next level?
Yeah, like I guess I'm in pet cat range because this is, obviously you watch every game, you had every film, and you talk to these players. He's not getting any attention, and I don't understand why, but there's this cornerback named BJ Mays, and BJ Mays led the team in interceptions. He was Johnny on the spot in every game. I mean, he had 2 interceptions against LSU to essentially change the tide of that football game. Obviously, Marcel Reed came in and scored all the touchdowns in the second half, but BJ Mays is 2 interceptions. He's a guy who just was always around the football. He had never played nickel corner before, and they put him in at nickel, and he was a star there. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but I'm telling you, if he ends up in a camp, if somebody goes undrafted free agent with him, I feel confident he could stick around, and people would be like, why wasn't this guy drafted, late day 3 at least?
Yeah. Is he a nickel at the next level, you think, too?
Yeah, he has position flex. I mean, he spent his whole life playing the outside, then kicked inside. I'm like, I think this kid can play.
I love that. Yeah, we just the Bears just signed Kyler Gordon to an extension and made him the highest paid nickel corner. So it's probably not something that they draft at least early, but somebody like that, when you're talking about depth and you may get lucky. Ryan Poles is already with a Jack Sanborn, an undrafted guy, ended up finding some good talent actually in some of the undrafted free agents. So it's interesting. I always love hearing that because obviously when you cover a team, you're closer. You see day to day, week to week, how these guys play. And so sometimes there are misses. There's some guys on Notre Dame that I'm way higher on than other people are. But it's just because you get to see it. And it's like, you're not just looking at the box score. You're not just running and looking at their stats and trying to figure out what they did this last year. But Tony, I really appreciate it. If the Bears draft Shamar, I might have to have you back on so we can have another episode of talking some more in depth and maybe some specifics of games and stuff like that of good things. Cause I know Bears fans will probably need to be calmed down a little bit if that does happen, but I appreciate you a ton. I know things are a little bit crazy, but we're a little over a week away from the draft. So fun stuff.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Have a good day.